Looking back at the history of RC cars, the first remote-controlled car ever created was the nitro-powered Ferrari 250 LM. It was invented by an Italian electronics company in 1966. A year after, RC cars started being commercially produced by a British company. At the same time, other manufacturers such as Model Car Enterprises began to make RC car kits. They were called pan cars. In 1967, a small group of people dedicated to racing RC cars formed a competitive radio-controlled car racing club known as ROAR, or Radio Operated Auto Racing. In 1969, the first ROAR National Championship race was held at Sunset Ford car dealership in Garden Grove, using 8th scale nitro pan cars. This is an original video of the starting lineup for the first ever ROAR Championship races. Two years after the first ROAR Championship race, Team Associated produced its very first RC car called the RC1. It was a 1/8 scale nitro-powered on-road pan car. 4 years later, the company produced the next model, also a 1/8 scale nitro car, called the RC100. The 70s were also the years when electric cars were introduced. These models helped to boost the popularity of the hobby. A Japanese company, Tamiya, produced its first electric on-road cars in 1976. This 1/12 scale RC car was powered by an electric motor that sat on a pan chassis. At the same time, they also produced, indirectly, detailed plastic kits and radio systems which were rapidly sold. Team Associated followed their competitors by releasing the RC12E electric pan car in 1978. In 1979, Tamiya introduced off-road buggy cars to the hobby. These models use real suspension systems, powerful motors, textured rubber tires of various sizes, and dune buggy bodies designed to allow the cars to be driven on rough terrain. The company released two models, the Rogue Rider and the Sand Scorcher. The Rogue Rider packed a die-cast suspension system and large rubber tires. Today, these two cars can be worth thousands of dollars and are sought by many RC enthusiasts. In the same year, the world's first 1/18th On-Road Gas Championship was held in Geneva, where Philip Booth won the championship. This was also the year that marked the starting of the RC Golden Era. Off-road electric cars had caught the interest of many avid RC fans because the cars were no longer restricted to smooth paved roads. Other models that were popular during this off-road era were the Tamiya Frog, Hornet, Grasshopper, as well as monster truck models like Blackfoot and Cloudbuster. The Golden Era continued until the early 1980s. The 1980s marked another milestone in the history of RC cars. This is the era where RC cars moved from simple scale models to high-performance models. The popularity of RC also skyrocketed during this time. As proof, the 1/12 scale World Championship was now held every 2 years, and we could see up to 400 racers joining the race. The 1/10 scale off-road RC cars also started to enjoy its popularity during this time. Besides Tamiya, significant numbers of US-based companies started to emerge to produce top-performing RC cars in the 80s. American manufacturers like Team Associated, Traxxas, and Losi were some of them. Team Associated, for example, produced its award-winning buggy model, RC10 in 1984. It was a high-grade car that featured aircraft-grade aluminum alloy body chassis. It also contained a transmission with adjustable ball differential that allowed the car to tune to any track condition. In 1985, the first ever IFMAR World Championship was held. This is an original clip of the first ever IFMAR World Championship race.
Who annihilated the TQ time with a 21 lap 5:03. Here he comes, crossing the start finish line with a 14.5 lap time. The time so very important in determining the world champion. Jay Halsey with the associated prototype moving into second place. In third, car number 7, it looks like it's going to be Paul Dion. And in fourth, Glenn Glass from Proline Racing, Trinity Motors, and Team Ugly. Gil Losi Jr. not running away from the pack like he did in the first heat.
One of the most influential RC companies in competition RC racing is none other than Team Losi Racing. Team Losi was started by Gil Losi Sr. in the 1980s. In 1985, Gil Losi Jr. won the first ever RC International IFMAR Championship Series. Some of the top-tier road racers in the 1980s were Ron Ton and Peko Rapp, also winning his first world title, Rody Rowan. By the 1990s, RC trucks were transitioning into racing trucks rather than the monster trucks of the past. The 1990s brought a whole new level of RC racing as more and more RC tracks and drivers entered the sport. Each year there was more and more fans coming just to watch the RC races, as you can tell from this 1991 IFMAR Worlds video. The off-road RC cars grew much more now that manufacturers were developing new and better models. The two main off-road classes were the buggy and the stadium truck classes. The Losi model XXT and the associated RC10 were some of the popular models that helped grow the off-road RC racing. In the late 90s, Traxxas started to make the ready-to-run models like the Bandit, Rustler, and Stampede. They quickly became very popular. Some big-name drivers in the 90s were Chris Bing, Greg Hudd, and Brian Kinwald, all top drivers in the off-road 1996 Roar Series. This is a race from 1997. At this point, RC was at its peak for most fans and drivers.
what you got. The win is going to go to Mr. Mark Ramirez, takes the win.
After the 90s, the era of the bashers and short course trucks began. This was also the time when RC fans started to adopt ready-to-run RC models. Plus, from 2001 until 2011, several rebranding efforts occurred. Horizon Hobbies bought Losi in 2001 and rebranded the racing team. They are now called Team Losi Racing or TLR. In 2005, Thunder Tiger of Taiwan bought Team Associated. The hobby witnessed a change in its radio system technology from AM to FM to 2.4 GHz. During this decade, RC manufacturers have started to use the 2.4 GHz modules on their transmitter. This is when another company, Spectrum, started making remotes. In 2004, the followers of the hobby shifted their attention to rock crawlers with the new release of a crawler kit that made it easier for everyone to build rock crawling vehicles. This model was called the AX10 Scorpion. This was the start of the rock crawler trend. Four years later, in 2008, a brand new segment took its course. Traxxas released the famous Slash. It is a two-wheel drive short course truck model that has shifted the RC trends from nitro gas back to electric. It also put short course trucks under the limelight. Numerous numbers of short course trucks were released at that time by manufacturers like Kyosho, HPI, Team Associated, Losi, Durango, and others. The models resembled the look of an actual off-road truck. In the early 21st century, video game companies started to make RC car games. Some of them were very popular, like this RC game, Revolt.
It is time, ladies and gentlemen, for the 2010 8-scale Buggy A Final.
From 2000 to 2010 was the age of RC bashers. But RC racing was still popular as more and more people started to race the 1/8 scale nitro buggy cars. In 2010, the RC racing sport steadily started to climb in popularity. It slowly kept climbing over the years. Some of the top drivers now are shown in this IFMAR Worlds clip from 2010.
LRP Bjorn Neumann, a 9th on the grid. From the land down under Australia, driving for Mugen, Kyle McBride. 8th qualifier from France, driving for Mugen, Renault Savoia. 7th on the grid. From the United States, driving for Hobau, Jeremy Courts. 6th on the starting grid. From the United States, driving for Team Associated, Ryan Cavalieri. 5th on the starting grid. From the United States, driving for Serpent, Billy Easton. 4th on the grid. From the United States, driving for Team Associated, Ryan Maifield. 3rd on the starting grid. From the United States, driving for Kyosho, Jared Tebow. 2nd on the grid. From the United States, driving for Kyosho, Cody King. And your top qualifier, starting in 1 position, from Japan, driving for Hot Bodies, Atsushi Hara.
Boys and girls, pull up a chair because you're about to witness the 2010 IFMAR 1/8 scale World Championship final event.
You saw the stands are packed with spectators. Everybody very excited for this championship final. The mechanics are there, topping off the fuel tanks, making the last-minute tuning adjustments as the mechanics bring their...
After the thrill of bashing the Traxxas Slashes and rock crawling with RC cars, RC Tracks started making racing classes for the Slash, called the Stock Slash class. This slowly started bringing in the bashers into RC racing, but from 2010 and on, the short course trucks became really popular as Team Associated came out with their SC10. With the new TLR 1.0 series of RC cars, the racing vehicles became way better than ever before. 1/10 scale two-wheel drive buggies were becoming very popular in the indoor RC tracks.
We're going racing on the sound of the tone. And here we go. Off and running, Rivkin locked and loaded from the front row. Martin tucking to the inside there. And a very good start. Here we go, Rivkin lean away in lap number 1 as they come on to the Reedy straightaway. Martin is in second. Third spot behind him is going to be Koiki Kato. Dustin Evans behind them. Evans to the inside. Kato, though, muscling his way by. Kato upside down. Tebow's on it.
These days, the hype might not be as grand as the hype back in the 80s and 90s. However, the hobby still has its loyal followers and is slowly growing into what the sport used to be. The future is looking up as new tracks and drivers are joining the RC sport. Thank you for watching this short film of the history of RC racing. I'm Cole Neeley, bye for now, and stay tuned for more videos in the future. So do you know any of the history of like when RC started?
The reason RC got started, I don't know if you know this or not, but the very first thing that was ever raced in radio control was the RC10 buggy. That came out first. And then that just took off like crazy, and Losi came out with the very first stadium truck called the Junior XT. Raw racing back then was 4-minute heats and mains.
Whoa.
And that was it, you know? And you could barely make them, you know. And then when the 2000s came out, they bumped it to 5 minutes. Well, everybody that had the old batteries couldn't make 4.5 minutes, you know. So everybody had to go out and get new batteries, and that made some people mad. But that's, if you're gonna stick with the hobby, you gotta flow with the hobby, you know. And it wasn't that much more money; it was $5 a pack more, so it wasn't all that bad. So,
what would you say are some of the big races that you've been to?
Actually, my biggest race was my first year. Joel and all the guys we went down to Bridgeport, Michigan. That's kind of like right down by the thumb in the Lower Peninsula, and it was the Michigan State Championship. And there was 175 stadiums there, and I wound up 22nd my first year.
Well, thanks for talking to me, friend.
Oh, no problem. We'll do more of this for sure, Mike.